6 bullets tore through her body, radio dead. Blood soaking through her uniform. Alone in hostile territory, with an unconscious Navy SEAL bleeding out beside her. The extraction point was 2 miles away across rugged terrain. No one expected her to survive, let alone save anyone else. Yet 12 hours later, as dawn broke over the forward operating base, guards spotted a figure limping toward the gates. A woman, barely standing, carrying a man twice her size across her shoulders. Medical staff rushed forward in disbelief. She refused treatment until they took him first. "He's one of ours," she whispered before collapsing. No one knew then that her impossible journey would rewrite the military's understanding of human endurance. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Eastern coast of Somalia, Operation Vigilant Storm, July 2022. Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez, 29 years old, Latin American descent, compact athletic build with dark hair typically secured tightly under her combat helmet, was the newest combat medic. Assigned to Joint Special Operations Task Force Horn of Africa. Despite 8 years of military service including 2 previous deployments, Maya was still considered an outsider in this elite unit of mostly male operators. The veteran special operators often viewed support personnel, especially medics, as necessary baggage rather than force multipliers. Maya had overheard the whispers when she first arrived at the forward operating base 3 months earlier. "Great. Another support element to babysit," one operator had muttered to another. "Let's hope she doesn't freeze up when bullets start flying." Maya kept her head down and focused on her job. Each morning, she meticulously checked her medical kit, ran 5 miles around the base perimeter before the scorching African sun rose too high, and spent hours studying regional medical conditions and combat trauma protocols. During mission briefings, she sat quietly taking notes, speaking only when directly addressed about medical considerations. Commander Jackson, leader of SEAL Team 7's Alpha Squad, had reluctantly accepted Maya as their mission medic after their regular combat medic was injured during training. "Rodriguez, you understand this isn't a humanitarian mission, right? We go in fast, complete the objective, extract. Your job is to keep my men operational. If something goes sideways, nothing more." "Understood, sir," Maya had replied simply. She didn't mention her previous combat experience or the commendation she'd received during her last deployment. Her personnel file contained that information, but few bothered to read beyond the basics. Female, medic, support element. The mission was classified, but straightforward: extract a high-value intelligence asset who had been working undercover gathering information on a terrorist network operating along the Somalia-Kenya border. The intelligence officer had sent an emergency extraction request after discovering plans for an imminent attack on a civilian target. The window for extraction was narrow, and the team needed to move quickly. During the pre-mission briefing, Maya noticed something concerning in the satellite imagery of the extraction zone. "Sir, the designated landing zone shows significant vegetation changes compared to last month's imagery. Possible ambush position." Her voice was calm, factual. Commander Jackson glanced at the image, then at Maya. "Noted, Rodriguez. We'll adjust the approach. Anything else?" "Medical intelligence suggests increased activity of a hemorrhagic fever in nearby villages. Recommend prophylactic measures and additional decontamination protocols post-mission." Several operators exchanged looks. One whispered to another, always with the worst-case scenarios. The night of the operation arrived with a new moon, providing optimal darkness for the team's infiltration. The 6-person team boarded the stealth helicopter, each operator checking equipment one final time. Maya sat slightly apart, her medical pack larger than the others' gear. No one spoke during the flight, each person mentally preparing for their role. As the helicopter approached the drop zone, Commander Jackson gave Maya one last instruction. Stay in the middle of the formation. If things go bad, find cover and wait for instructions. We can't have you running around trying to be a hero. Maya nodded silently, knowing this wasn't the time to argue. As the helicopter touched down briefly, the team moved out in practice formation. Maya kept pace easily, her physical training evident in her efficient movement through the difficult terrain. They moved silently through the darkness, approaching the extraction point where their intelligence asset waited. The first sign of trouble came when they were approximately 800 meters from the rendezvous point. The team's point man raised his fist, signaling everyone to freeze. Through night vision goggles, they could see movement ahead, too many figures for just their asset and the expected single escort. Ambush, Commander Jackson whispered into his radio. Fall back to position Bravo. The team began a tactical retreat, but before they could reach safer ground, the night erupted with gunfire. Maya immediately dropped to the ground, training overriding fear. She heard the sharp crack of bullets passing overhead and the dull thud of rounds hitting nearby trees and earth. Contact left, shouted one of the operators. Heavy firepower, multiple hostiles. Commander Jackson's voice came through clearly. On the radio. Rodriguez, get to the fallen tree at your 3 o'clock. Medical position there. Maya crawled quickly to the designated spot, pulling her medical kit close. She checked her sidearm, ensuring it was ready if needed. From her position, she could see the team returning fire, moving in coordinated patterns to establish a defensive perimeter. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The firefight intensified, with enemy combatants pushing forward, trying to flank the SEAL team. An explosion rocked the area. A grenade had landed near their position. When the dust cleared, Maya saw one of the operators down, clutching his leg. Without hesitation, she moved low and fast to reach him, staying in the shadows. Petty Officer Wilson, she said firmly, already assessing the wound. Shrapnel to the right thigh. I need to stop the bleeding. Wilson grimaced through the pain. Get back to cover, Rodriguez. I'll manage. Maya ignored him, quickly applying a tourniquet and injecting a dose of pain medication. You'll need surgery, but this will hold for now. Can you move with assistance? Before Wilson could answer, another burst of gunfire erupted nearby. Maya felt a sharp burning sensation in her shoulder, her first gunshot wound. The bullet had passed clean through, missing bone and major blood vessels. Rodriguez is hit, Wilson called into his radio. Status? Commander Jackson's voice crackled through. Maya grabbed the radio. Functional. Wound is minor. Wilson needs extraction. Heavy bleeding from thigh wound. Negative on immediate extraction. Too hot. Hold position. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Enemy fighters had circled behind them, cutting off their planned escape route. 2 more operators sustained injuries, though they remained combat effective. Maya moved between them, providing essential medical care while ignoring her own wound. Commander Jackson made the difficult call, split into 2 elements, Wilson and Rodriguez with me. We'll create a diversion while the rest of you move the package to extraction point Delta. The plan was sound until a sniper's bullet caught Commander Jackson in the chest. Maya saw him go down and rush to his side, dragging him behind a rocky outcropping for cover. Exit wound upper right chest, she reported clinically, even as her hands worked to seal the wound with an occlusive dressing. Possible pneumothorax. Need to evacuate immediately. Jackson's breathing was labored, blood bubbling at his lips. Radio. Destroyed, he managed. Other team, already moving. Maya quickly assessed the situation. They were cut off from the rest of the squad. Jackson needed advanced medical care within hours, or he would die. Wilson couldn't walk unassisted, and enemy forces were closing in. "Sir, I'm getting you both out," Maya said, her voice leaving no room for argument. Jackson attempted a laugh that turned into a cough. "Rodriguez, be realistic. I'm combat ineffective. You get Wilson to the secondary extraction point." "That's an order." Maya checked her map quickly. The secondary extraction point was approximately 2 miles southeast, through enemy territory, with 2 wounded men, 1 critically. "With respect, sir, I'm not leaving you behind." What happened next would later be described in classified debriefings as a tactically impossible situation overcome through extraordinary measures. Maya created a makeshift travois using branches and her own tactical vest to drag Commander Jackson. She helped Wilson to his feet, supporting him with her unwounded shoulder. "We move in 5-minute intervals," she instructed. "Rest for 2 minutes between movements. Wilson, you're on security. I'll handle navigation and the commander." Wilson looked dubious. "Rodriguez, this is suicide. Jackson weighs at least 220. You're what, 140 soaking wet? And you're wounded." 135, Maya corrected. "And I deadlift twice my body weight. We're moving, now." They had covered less than half a mile when the enemy patrol found them. 3 fighters emerged from the darkness, weapons raised. Maya reacted instinctively, pushing Wilson down while drawing her sidearm. 3 rapid shots, 3 hits. But not before return fire tore through her left thigh and grazed her side. Wilson stared at her in shock. "Where did you learn to shoot?" "Like that?" Maya didn't answer, already applying a pressure bandage to her new wound. "Can you still provide security?" "Yes, but you've got 2 gunshot wounds now. You can't possibly carry Jackson." Maya tightened the bandage. "Watch me." The night wore on, a brutal test of endurance and will. Maya navigated by stars, avoiding known enemy positions, stopping only when absolutely necessary to check Jackson's deteriorating condition or to adjust her makeshift carrying system. Each step sent waves of pain through her body, blood slowly soaking through her uniform. An hour before dawn, disaster struck again. A hidden enemy position opened fire as they crossed a small clearing. Maya pushed Wilson into a drainage ditch, covering Jackson's body with her own. The bullets found her, 1 in her right arm, another in her left shoulder, a 3rd grazing her ribs. 6 wounds total now. Wilson pulled her into the ditch. "That's it. We're done. You can't even lift your arm now." Maya's face was pale from blood loss, but her eyes remained clear and determined. "Check, Jackson," she managed. Wilson did so, his expression grim, pulses thready but present. "Rodriguez, he's not going to make it, and neither will you, if we don't stop and properly treat these wounds." Maya tore open a packet of hemostatic agent with her teeth, packing it into the worst of her new wounds. "We're less than a mile from extraction. If we stop now, we all die." "You physically cannot carry him anymore," Wilson insisted. Maya looked at him, then at Jackson. "Yes, I can." What happened next defied medical and physical explanation. Maya Rodriguez, with 6 gunshot wounds, created a fireman's carry position and lifted Commander Jackson across her shoulders. Her body should have failed. Blood loss alone should have rendered her unconscious. The pain should have been paralyzing. "Wilson," she said through gritted teeth, "you're on point. 1/4-mile movements. Stop if you hear anything." Wilson, a hardened combat veteran, would later say it was the most humbling moment of his career. "I'd been shot once and thought I was tough for still walking." She had 6 gunshot wounds and was carrying a man who outweighed her by 80 pounds. The final stretch to the extraction point became a blur of pain and determination. Maya focused only on the next step, then the next. When her legs threatened to buckle, she recited a mantra her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran, had taught her. "The body surrenders long before the mind. The mind surrenders long before the spirit." At 0612 hours, as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Maya Rodriguez emerged from the tree line at the edge of the forward operating base. Guards on the perimeter spotted the impossible sight: a blood-soaked woman, carrying a man twice her size across her shoulders, with another wounded man limping beside her. "Medical emergency," Wilson shouted, his voice hoarse. "Seal down. Medic down." Personnel rushed from the base, medical staff racing ahead with stretchers. When they reached Maya, she refused to relinquish her burden until they promised to take Jackson first. "He's one of ours," she whispered, before her body finally gave out and she collapsed. The base erupted into frantic activity. The medical team worked desperately to stabilize both Jackson and Maya before medevac helicopters arrived to transport them to the nearest surgical facility. Wilson, his own wound now properly treated, recounted the night's events to the base commander. "Sir, what Rodriguez did, it shouldn't have been physically possible. She was shot 6 times. She carried Commander Jackson for over a mile. She kept us alive and on course the entire time." The base commander, a veteran of 3 wars, shook his head in disbelief. "I've seen men with a single gunshot wound unable to continue fighting. You're telling me she took 6 and still completed the mission?" "Yes, sir. And the thing is, not once did she complain or suggest leaving anyone behind. It was just impossible wasn't in her vocabulary." Within hours, the story began spreading throughout the base and up the chain of command. Medical personnel who treated Maya were astonished at her condition. One doctor remarked, "By all medical understanding, she should have been incapacitated after the 2nd or 3rd wound. The blood loss alone should have rendered her unconscious." What no one yet knew was that Maya Rodriguez had a history that hadn't made it into her personnel file. Her grandfather had been a Navy corpsman in Vietnam, earning a Silver Star for carrying 3 wounded Marines to safety under enemy fire. Her father had been a pararescue jumper, one of the elite Air Force special operators trained specifically to recover personnel from hostile territory. Maya had grown up hearing their stories, absorbing their ethos. These things we do, that others may live. When Maya finally regained consciousness in the field hospital 2 days later, the first words out of her mouth were, "Commander Jackson?" The nurse beside her bed smiled. "He's stable. The surgeons repaired his lung. He's asking about you." Maya closed her eyes, relief washing over her face. "And Wilson?" "Already hobbling around on crutches, telling everyone who'll listen about what you did." Maya shook her head slightly. "Just did my job." The nurse checked Maya's vital signs, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes revealing admiration. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, I've been a combat nurse for 15 years. What you did goes way beyond just doing your job. 6 gunshot wounds, and you carried a 220-pound man for over a mile. The doctors are calling it medically impossible." Maya's response was simple. "Someone once told me that impossible is just an opinion." 3 days later, Commander Jackson was stable enough to be wheeled into Maya's room. His normally stern face was softer, humbled. "Rodriguez," he said quietly, "I owe you my life." Maya shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. "Anyone would have done the same, sir." Jackson shook his head. "No, they wouldn't have. I've been in special operations for 17 years. What you did, I've never seen anything like it." He paused, struggling with emotion unusual for the hardened operator. "I misjudged you. We all did." Maya looked at him directly. "Permission to speak freely, sir. Granted. I didn't do it to prove anything. I did it because that's what we're supposed to do. Leave no one behind isn't just a saying, it's a promise." Jackson nodded slowly. "When we get back stateside, I'm recommending you for the Navy Cross." Maya started to protest, but Jackson raised his hand. "That's not up for debate, Lieutenant. What you did deserves recognition." What Maya Rodriguez didn't know was that her actions that night would catalyze significant changes within special operations communities. Her case would become a study in human performance under extreme duress. Training protocols would be re-evaluated. Most importantly, the unspoken bias against female operators and support personnel would face a profound challenge. The medical report on Maya's injuries and subsequent performance became required. Reading at Special Operations medical courses. 6 gunshot wounds, catastrophic blood loss, and still she completed the mission. The questions it raised about human potential and mental fortitude would inspire a generation of military, medical professionals to reconsider what was possible when spirit overcame physical limitations. As Maya slowly recovered, visitors came, first her immediate team members, then operators from other units on the base. They came quietly, respectfully, often just to shake her hand or stand awkwardly by her bed for a moment. A young corpsman, who had helped treat her when she first arrived, summed it up best. Lieutenant Rodriguez showed us that the strongest muscle in the human body isn't the heart or the legs. It's the will. Maya's grandfather had always told her, true strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting up every time you fall, even when it seems impossible. On that night in Somalia, Maya had fallen 6 times, each bullet a devastating blow that should have ended her fight. 6 times she rose again, carrying not just her own burden but the weight of another's life. In the days following Maya's miraculous return to base, the military medical staff struggled to comprehend what they were witnessing. By all conventional medical understanding, she should have died from her injuries. 6 gunshot wounds, severe blood loss, extreme physical exertion, the combination would have killed most soldiers. Yet 3 days after surgery, Maya was already attempting to sit up in her hospital bed, asking about returning to duty. Lieutenant Rodriguez, you need to understand the severity of your condition. Dr. Patel, the lead trauma surgeon, explained during morning rounds. Your body has suffered catastrophic trauma. You've lost nearly 40% of your blood volume. 2 bullets had to be surgically removed, and we've repaired damage to your deltoid muscle, bicep, and vastus lateralis. Recovery will take months, not days. Maya nodded politely, but her eyes revealed she had a different timeline in mind. When the doctor left, she carefully disconnected her swung her legs over the side of the bed, and attempted to stand. She collapsed immediately, her body betraying her iron will. A nurse rushed in, finding Maya on the floor. Lieutenant, what are you doing? Testing a theory, Maya replied through gritted teeth. Theory disproven. Help me up, please. The nurse, Chief Petty Officer Diaz, had served 3 combat tours herself before becoming a medical professional. She recognized the look in Maya's eyes, the frustration of a warrior whose body couldn't match their spirit. Instead of lecturing, she helped Maya back to bed and then sat beside her. I know what you're feeling, Diaz said quietly. The need to prove you're not broken. The fear that if you stay down too long, you might never get back up. Maya's eyes widened slightly. Yes, exactly that. Diaz nodded. I took shrapnel to the spine. In Kandahar in 2014, doctors said I'd never walk unassisted again. Took me 18 months, but I proved them wrong. She paused, meeting Maya's gaze directly. But I only proved them wrong because I was smart about my recovery. Pushed the boundaries, yes, but respected the process. You try to rush this, you'll cause permanent damage. For the first time since waking up, Maya truly listened. How did you do it? The recovery, I mean. 1 impossible thing each day, Diaz answered. Just 1. Make it count, then rest. Tomorrow, do something a little more impossible. That afternoon, when Commander Jackson visited again, he found Maya sitting upright, reviewing medical literature on tablet computer. Planning your miraculous recovery? He asked. Something like that, Maya replied. Sir, I have a question that's been bothering me. Go ahead. Why didn't you know about my background? My file clearly states my father was PJ, my grandfather was a decorated corpsman. I have advanced medical training beyond standard combat medic qualification. I scored in the top percentile in every physical fitness test. Yet everyone treated me like I was a liability. Jackson had the decency to look uncomfortable. Honestly, I never read your full file. I saw support personnel and female and made assumptions. That's on me, and I was wrong. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. But Rodriguez, you never spoke up either. You never mentioned your family background or your qualifications. Maya looked away. In my experience, sir, people believe what they see with their actions, not what they hear in words. Jackson nodded slowly. Fair enough, and your actions spoke volumes. What neither of them knew was that Maya's story was already spreading, far beyond their forward operating base. Initial reports had reached SOCOM headquarters, where senior leaders were reviewing the after-action details with increasing amazement. In an era where military physical standards and gender integration remained controversial topics, Maya Rodriguez had just rewritten the parameters of the possible. Meanwhile, Wilson had been discharged from the medical facility and returned to Cone. Limited duty. He found himself constantly answering questions about that night. Fellow operators who had previously dismissed Maya now wanted to know everything: her tactical decisions, her medical interventions, how she'd managed to navigate in the darkness while wounded and encumbered. I still don't understand how. She did it, Wilson admitted to his team during a debriefing session. Physically, it shouldn't have been possible. But here's what really gets me. Not once did she complain. Not once did she suggest leaving Jackson behind, even when it was clearly the logical choice. And the way she shot. 3 targets, 3 hits, in near darkness, while already wounded. The team's senior enlisted leader, Master Chief Ortiz, had been quiet during the discussion. Now he spoke, his voice thoughtful. My father served in Vietnam. He told me there were 2 kinds of heroes: those who did extraordinary things because they didn't understand the danger, and those who did extraordinary things despite fully understanding the danger. Sounds like Rodriguez was the second kind. The base commander had ordered a complete review of Maya's personnel file, and what emerged painted a picture very different from the quiet, unassuming medic they thought they knew. Maya Rodriguez had graduated top of her class in combat medicine. She had qualified expert on multiple weapons platforms. Her physical fitness scores were consistently in the top 1%. Her previous deployments had included combat operations where she'd received commendations for treating wounded under fire. Most notably, her psychological evaluation contained a telling observation. Lieutenant Rodriguez displays uncommon situational awareness and tactical patience. Unlike many high performers, she appears unbothered by lack of recognition and may actually prefer operating without attention. 5 days after surgery, Maya convinced the medical staff to allow her to attempt supervised physical therapy. Dr. Patel agreed reluctantly, warning that they would stop immediately if her vital signs showed distress. To everyone's surprise, Maya managed to stand and take 3 steps before requiring assistance. That's enough for today, Dr. Patel insisted. Maya shook her head. One more. I need to do one more. The doctor began to object, but Nurse Diaz intervened. One more, doctor. She can handle it. Maya took a deep breath, focusing through the pain, and took a 4th step, then a 5th. When she finally allowed the therapist to help her back to the wheelchair, her hospital gown was soaked with sweat, but her face showed satisfaction. Tomorrow, 7 steps, she declared. That evening, an unexpected visitor arrived, Captain Sarah Morrison, the highest-ranking female special operations officer in the region. She entered Maya's room quietly, introducing herself with a firm handshake. Lieutenant Rodriguez, I've read the preliminary reports about your actions, Captain Morrison said. I wanted to meet you personally. Maya straightened as much as her injuries allowed. It's an honor, ma'am. Morrison pulled up a chair. I've been in special operations for 15 years. Started when women weren't allowed in combat roles. Had to fight for every opportunity. Even now, I still hear the whispers that I'm a token, that standards were lowered, that I don't belong. Maya nodded, understanding immediately. What you did out there, Morrison continued, it matters beyond just the lives you saved. It matters because it challenges a narrative that's persisted for too long. The narrative that women inherently lack the physical capacity for the most demanding combat roles. Maya shifted uncomfortably. With respect, ma'am, I wasn't thinking about making a statement. I was just doing my job. Morrison smiled. That's exactly why it matters so much. You weren't trying to prove anything, you just performed when it counted. She paused, studying Maya carefully. But I suspect this wasn't the first time you've exceeded expectations while being underestimated. Something flickered in Maya's eyes, recognition, perhaps, or a shared understanding. My father was pararescue. Growing up, I wanted to follow in his footsteps, but at that time, women weren't eligible. He never discouraged me, though. Instead, he taught me something I've never forgotten. What was that? Morrison asked. He said, Maya, throughout history, there have always been arbitrary lines drawn to define what certain people can and cannot do. The people who change the world are those who see those lines not as barriers, but as starting points. Morrison nodded slowly. Wise man, your father. He also said something else that guided me that night with Commander Jackson and Wilson, Maya added. He told me that true strength isn't measured in how much you can lift or how fast you can run. It's measured in what you're willing to endure for someone else. The two women spoke for nearly an hour, sharing experiences that few others could understand, the unique challenges they'd faced, the subtle and not-so-subtle biases they'd encountered, the strategies they'd developed to succeed in environments that hadn't always welcomed them. Before leaving, Captain Morrison placed a small object on Maya's bedside table, a challenge coin with the pararescue emblem. Your father's? Maya asked, surprised. Morrison shook her head. Mine. I was in the first class of female PJs when they finally opened the career field to women. Your father's generation laid the groundwork. My generation broke the barrier. But your generation, Lieutenant Rodriguez, you're showing what's truly possible when we stop focusing on who's doing the job and focus instead on how the job gets done. As Maya continued her recovery, something unexpected began happening. Junior enlisted personnel, particularly women, started finding reasons to pass by her room. Some came with legitimate questions about medical procedures or tactical situations. Others simply wanted to introduce themselves. A few admitted openly that they'd heard about what she did and wanted to meet her. One young Army specialist lingered. After delivering some paperwork, Ma'am, is it true you carried Commander Jackson for 2 miles with 6 gunshot wounds? Maya sighed. The story keeps growing. It was closer to 1 mile, and I had assistance part of the way. The specialist nodded earnestly. Still, ma'am, that's incredible. I've been struggling with my PT test, thinking maybe I'm just not cut out for this. But hearing about what you did... Her voice trailed off. Maya studied the young soldier, recognizing something of herself in the uncertain eyes. What's your name, specialist? Chun, ma'am, Amy Chun. Specialist Chun, can I tell you something I learned during my recovery here? Yes, ma'am. Our bodies are much more capable than we believe. Most of us never discover our true physical limits because we're stopped by something else first. Pain, fear, doubt. These are normal human responses. But in extraordinary circumstances, when something matters enough, we can push beyond what we thought was possible. Chun nodded, absorbing the words. The trick, Maya continued, is learning to access that extraordinary capacity during ordinary times. That's what training is really about, Not just building strength or endurance, but building the mental pathways to push beyond your perceived limits. The next day during physical therapy, Maya set a new goal, 10 steps unassisted. Her wounds were healing remarkably quickly, but the pain remained intense. Each step sent shooting pain through her leg and side. Focus on your breathing, the physical therapist instructed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Maya shook her head. That's not how I do it. Excuse me? Everyone has their own method for pushing through pain. Mine isn't breathing techniques. What is it then? The therapist asked, curious. Maya's expression became distant. I think about why I'm doing it, who I'm doing it for. On that night, every step carrying Commander Jackson, I thought about his family, his wife, his kids. I've never met them, but I imagined them waiting for news. That made the pain irrelevant. The therapist considered this. And now? Who are you taking these steps for? Maya looked toward the doorway, where Specialist Chun and several other junior enlisted personnel were watching discreetly. For them, she said quietly. Because what we believe is possible shapes what we attempt. She took not 10 steps that day, but 15. Commander Jackson was discharged from the hospital a day before Maya. Before leaving, he visited her one last time. His recovery would continue stateside, and they both knew they might never serve together again. Rodriguez, he said, standing at the foot of her bed. I've been in the teams for 17 years. Seen the best operators in the world. What you did that night. He paused, uncharacteristically emotional. It's changed how I think about what's possible. Maya nodded, accepting his words silently. I've put in the paperwork for your Navy Cross, he continued. But beyond that, I want you to know something. Every SEAL in my team has requested to work with you again. That doesn't happen, ever. Thank you, sir. Jackson hesitated, then added, my wife wants to meet you when you get stateside. If that's something you'd be comfortable with, Maya smiled. I'd like that very much, sir. After Jackson left, Maya received another visitor, the base commander, Colonel Richards. He entered formally, standing at the foot of her bed. Lieutenant Rodriguez, I wanted to personally inform you that your actions have been reported up the chain of command. The Secretary of Defense has taken personal interest in your case. Maya felt a flutter of anxiety. Sir, I was just doing my job. Richard smiled slightly. That seems to be your standard response. Regardless, your job performance has generated significant attention. Once you're medically cleared to travel, you're being evacuated to Walter Reed for continued treatment and eventual rehabilitation. Yes, sir. Richards paused, seeming to debate whether to continue. Lieutenant, I've been in the military for 27 years. I've seen acts of valor that defy description. But what you did, he shook his head. The medical staff still can't explain how you remained conscious, let alone functional, with those injuries. Maya met his gaze directly. Permission to speak freely, sir. Granted. I think sometimes we underestimate what humans are capable of when failure isn't an option. We set artificial limits based on averages and probabilities. But in critical moments, those limits don't matter. Richards nodded thoughtfully. There's wisdom in that, Lieutenant. He turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. Your story has already begun circulating throughout special operations communities. It's having an impact, I don't think you fully appreciate yet. People are reevaluating what they thought they knew about human performance and about who belongs in special operations. After the colonel left, Maya sat quietly, processing his words. She hadn't sought to become a symbol or catalyst for change. She had simply refused to accept that Commander Jackson and Wilson would die when she had the power to prevent it. Her grandfather had once told her, the true measure of strength isn't found in the gym or on the battlefield. It's found in that moment when every fiber of your being is screaming to stop, to give up, to accept defeat, and you take one more step anyway. On that night in Somalia, Maya had taken not just one more step, but hundreds more, each one a defiance of medical reality, each one a testament to the power of human will. And now it seemed, those steps were creating ripples that would extend far beyond her own journey. 2 weeks after her arrival at the forward operating base, more dead than alive, Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez was carefully loaded onto a medical evacuation flight bound for Germany, then onward to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in the United States. The base personnel lined the tarmac as she was carried to the aircraft, a spontaneous show of respect that left Maya fighting back tears. As the medical transport plane lifted off, Maya looked out the small window at the harsh landscape below. The same terrain she had crossed carrying a wounded man twice her size while bleeding from 6 gunshot wounds. From this height, the distance seemed impossible, the terrain impassable, yet she had done it. Step by agonizing step, she had defied what everyone, including trained medical professionals, thought possible. And in doing so, she had not only saved 2 lives but potentially changed countless others. The flight medic checked her vital signs, nodding with approval. "Your recovery rate is remarkable, Lieutenant. The doctors at Walter Reed are already reviewing your case. They're calling it unprecedented." Maya smiled faintly. "I had good motivation." "Commander Jackson?" the medic asked. "Partly," Maya acknowledged, "but also something my father taught me. He said that limits are often just opinions wearing the disguise of facts." As the aircraft carried her toward advanced medical care and the long road of rehabilitation, Maya reflected on the strange twists of fate. She had arrived at that forward operating base as an outsider, underestimated and overlooked. She was leaving as someone whose name would be whispered with reverence in this special operations community for years to come. Not because she had sought recognition, not because she had demanded respect, but because when faced with an impossible choice, she had simply refused to accept that impossible was the final answer. Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, Bethesda, Maryland, 3 months after Somalia. The rehabilitation wing echoed with the determined sounds of recovery, the rhythmic count of physical therapists, the metallic clank of weight machines, the occasional grunt of effort or pain. In a corner of the large therapy room, Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez gripped parallel bars tightly, sweat beading on her forehead as she forced her body through another walking exercise. "That's 15 minutes, Lieutenant," her physical therapist Mark Jensen said, checking his watch. "You've doubled your endurance from last week." Maya nodded, carefully lowering herself into the wheelchair that she now used only during therapy. "Sessions, still not good enough," she said quietly. Jensen kneeled beside her, his expression serious. "Maya, I need to say this again. What you're achieving is already remarkable. The damage to your quadriceps and hip flexors alone should have meant months more recovery before independent walking. Add in the nerve damage from the shoulder wounds, and frankly, it's medically extraordinary that you're functioning at this level." Maya wiped her face with a towel. "I appreciate that, Mark, but extraordinary for someone with my injuries isn't the same as fully operational. I need to get back to my unit." Jensen had been working with wounded warriors for 15 years, but Maya Rodriguez tested his professional detachment. Her determination went beyond the usual military stubbornness he encountered daily. There was something else driving her, something he couldn't quite define. "You have a visitor waiting in the atrium," Jensen said, changing the subject. "Commander Jackson came by. Said he could come back if you're too tired." Maya's face brightened immediately. "I'm never too tired for him." She wheeled herself toward the exit, having insisted weeks ago that she would propel her own chair during recovery. As Jensen watched her go, Dr. Garcia, the neurological specialist, stepped beside him. "How's our miracle patient today?" she asked. Jensen shook his head in amazement. "She just completed a 15-minute walking session with minimal support." Last week she could barely manage 7 minutes. Dr. Garcia reviewed the chart. Her nerve regeneration readings are off the charts. I've never seen recovery at this pace. She lowered her voice. The research team is quite interested in her case. They're suggesting some additional cognitive and physiological testing. Jensen frowned. She's not a lab specimen, Victoria. Of course not. But what her body is doing, it could help us understand how to better treat other wounded warriors. There's something unique happening with her recovery patterns. In the hospital atrium, Maya found Commander Jackson waiting. His own recovery was evident. He moved with only a slight stiffness that hinted at his healed chest wound. He smiled warmly when he saw her approaching. Rodriguez, he greeted her, the formality of her surname now an affectionate habit rather than military protocol. You're looking stronger every time I visit. Maya returned the smile. Thank you, sir. How's the lung capacity? 85% and improving. Doctors say I might even return to full dive status eventually. He gestured toward a quiet corner with comfortable seating. Got time to talk? Once settled, Jackson's expression grew more serious. I have news. The recommendation for your Navy Cross has been approved. The ceremony is scheduled for next month. Maya absorbed this information silently. Awards and recognition had never been her motivation. There's more, Jackson continued. SOCOM is reviewing our after-action reports extensively. Your performance that night has raised significant questions about human performance under extreme duress. They're calling it the Rodriguez case in some circles. Maya shifted uncomfortably. I didn't do anything special, sir. I just refused to give up. Jackson leaned forward. That's exactly the point, Maya. Most people would have given up. Most people would have died from those injuries, let alone been able to function tactically and medically. He paused. The brass wants to understand what made the difference. Is that why researchers keep asking to run tests? Maya asked, her tone revealing mild frustration. Partly, but there's another reason. Jackson hesitated. There's a new Joint Special Operations Task Force being formed. Specialized extraction and medical support for high-risk operations. They want you involved once you're recovered. Maya's eyes widened slightly. In what capacity? Initially as an advisor on selection and training protocols. Eventually, possibly as an operational team leader. Jackson watched her carefully. It would mean a promotion to captain and a chance to shape something important from the ground up. For the first time in their conversation, genuine excitement showed on Maya's face. When can I start? Jackson laughed. First priority is getting you fully recovered. Speaking of which, what are the doctors saying about your timeline? Maya's expression hardened with determination. They say 6 more months before full duty. I'm aiming for 4. Of course you are, Jackson said with a knowing smile. Oh, before I forget, Wilson asked me to give you this. He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a hand-carved wooden figure, a woman carrying a man on her shoulders. The craftsmanship was impressive, capturing the strain and determination in the woman's posture. He took up woodworking during his recovery, Jackson explained. Said it helps with the fine motor skills in his hands. Maya ran her fingers over the carving, emotion tightening her throat. Please thank him for me. After Jackson left, Maya wheeled herself to the hospital garden. Despite the cool autumn air, she needed the peace of the outdoor space to process everything. The recognition, the new task force opportunity, the ongoing medical interest in her case. It was overwhelming for someone who had always preferred to work quietly in the background. Her solitude was interrupted by the approach of another wheelchair. Colonel Rebecca Hayes, a renowned combat surgeon who had lost both legs to an IED in Afghanistan, skillfully maneuvered her chair beside Maya's. Mind some company, Lieutenant? She asked. Not at all, ma'am, Maya replied, straightening instinctively in the presence of a senior officer. Hayes had been at Walter Reed longer than almost any other patient, not because her recovery required it, but because she now served as both patient and physician, working with the most difficult trauma cases while continuing her own rehabilitation. "I've been meaning to introduce myself," Hayes said. "I've heard a lot about you." Maya nodded politely, unsure how to respond. "You know," Hayes continued, "in my 20 years of military medicine, I've treated thousands of combat injuries. I've seen people survive things they shouldn't have, and I've seen people die from wounds that should have been survivable." She paused, looking out at the garden. "The difference often isn't medical. It's something else entirely." "What do you mean?" Maya asked. "The human spirit," Hayes said simply. "The absolute refusal to give up. I've watched patients with nearly identical injuries have completely different outcomes based largely on their mental approach to recovery." Maya considered this. "My grandfather used to say something similar. He believed our bodies are capable of far more than we think, but we're limited by our minds." Hayes smiled. "Smart man, your grandfather. The researchers studying your case are focused on the physiological, how your body managed to function with catastrophic blood loss. How your muscles continued to work despite severe trauma. But they're missing something crucial." "What's that?" "The why," Hayes said emphatically. "Why did you keep going when every physical signal was telling you to stop? What was driving you?" Maya was silent for a long moment. "When I was carrying Commander Jackson," she finally said, "I wasn't thinking about myself at all. Not about my pain, not about my injuries. I was completely focused on getting him to safety, on making sure he didn't die out there." Hayes nodded. "Purpose transcends pain. When we have a reason that matters enough, we can endure almost anything." She gestured to her own missing legs. "After I was hit, I performed emergency surgery on 3 Marines while bleeding out myself. Doctors later told me it should have been impossible for me to remain conscious, let alone perform complex medical procedures. But those Marines needed me, so somehow I did it." The two women sat in companionable silence, each understanding something profound about the other without needing more words. After a few minutes, Hayes spoke again. "I hear they're forming a new task force with you in mind." Maya looked surprised. "Word travels fast." "It's a small community," Hayes replied with a shrug. "I think it's a good idea. What happened to you wasn't just about individual heroism. It revealed something important about human potential that could benefit others. If I can help other operators, then everything I went through was worth it," Maya said. Hayes studied her thoughtfully. "You know, most people would be focused on their own recovery, their own future. But you're immediately thinking about how your experience can serve others. That right there might be part of what enabled you to do what you did." Before Maya could respond, a young woman in hospital scrubs approached them hesitantly. "Excuse me, Lieutenant Rodriguez? There's a group of medical students here to observe rehabilitation techniques. Dr. Jensen thought you might be willing to demonstrate your walking progress, but he said it's completely your choice." Maya glanced at Colonel Hayes, who gave her an encouraging nod. "I'd be happy to help," Maya replied. When she returned to the rehabilitation room, Maya found not just medical students, but a mixed group that included several wounded warriors from other recovery wards. The physical therapy team had set up the walking course with parallel bars and monitoring equipment. Dr. Jensen approached her. "Sorry for the audience. Word has gotten around about your recovery progress. These folks are interested in both the medical aspects and—" He hesitated. "The inspirational ones." Maya understood immediately. The other patients weren't there just to observe medical techniques. They were looking for hope, for evidence that seemingly impossible recovery was achievable. "No pressure," Jensen added. "We can keep it short." Maya looked at the faces. Watching her, the medical students eager for knowledge, the other wounded warriors searching for motivation in their own difficult journeys. She thought about what Colonel Hayes had said about purpose transcending pain. Actually, Maya said, making a decision, I'd like to try something new today. Jensen raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? The outdoor walking course. Maya said, no parallel bars. Jensen's expression shifted to concern. Maya, we haven't attempted that yet. It's significantly more challenging with variable terrain and no continuous support. I know, Maya acknowledged, but I think I'm ready. Jensen hesitated, then nodded. Let's move outside then. The group relocated to the outdoor rehabilitation course, a winding path with different surfaces including concrete, gravel and grass with only occasional handrails for support. It was typically used for patients in the final stages of recovery, not those still dependent on wheelchairs for daily mobility. Maya positioned herself at the starting point, gripping the first handrail. The audience gathered at a respectful distance, medical students taking notes while the wounded warriors watched with particular intensity. Jensen stood beside her. Remember, this isn't a test. We can stop any time. Maya nodded, but her focus was already narrowing to the task ahead. She carefully rose from the wheelchair, balancing on legs that still bore the scars of bullets and surgery. The pain was immediate and familiar, a burning sensation through her thigh where muscle and nerve had been repaired, a deeper ache in her hip joint. Her first steps were tentative, one hand always on the rail. 10 feet in, the rail ended, with the next support 15 feet ahead. This gap was the reason Jensen had considered the course premature for her condition. Maya paused at the end of the first rail, breathing deeply. She could feel the eyes on her, particularly those of the other wounded warriors. In that moment, she wasn't thinking about her own recovery or achievements. She was thinking about what her effort might mean to them, how seeing her push beyond expected limitations might help them believe in their own healing potential. With that thought firmly in mind, Maya released the rail and stepped forward into the unsupported section of the path. Her gait was uneven but determined. One step, then another. Halfway across the gap, her injured leg buckled slightly. Whispers of concern rippled through the audience, but Maya caught herself and continued. When she reached the next rail, applause broke out spontaneously. Maya didn't acknowledge it, already focused on the next section, a slight incline with a gravel surface. Step by painful step, she progressed through the course. What should have been a 5-minute walk took nearly 20, but Maya didn't stop or return to the wheelchair. At particularly difficult moments, she recalled the night in Somalia, how each step carrying Commander Jackson had seemed impossible until it was accomplished, how focusing entirely on the mission had somehow allowed her body to transcend its physical limitations. By the time she reached the end of the course, sweat soaked her therapy clothes, and her legs trembled with fatigue. But she remained standing, turning to face the group that had followed her progress. One of the wounded warriors, a young Marine, missing an arm and struggling with a prosthetic leg, approached her. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "they told us what you did in Somalia, but seeing you here today..." He struggled to find the words. "If you can do this after 6 gunshot wounds, maybe I can get back to my unit too." Maya looked into his eyes, recognizing the same determination she felt. "What's your name, Marine?" "Corporal James Reeves, ma'am." "Well, Corporal Reeves, my physical therapist taught me something important. Recovery isn't linear. Some days you'll take steps forward, others you'll fall back. The only failure is believing those setbacks define your limits." The young Marine nodded, absorbing her words. "Thank you, ma'am." As the group dispersed, Jensen approached with the wheelchair. "That was incredible, Maya. You just completed a course we hadn't planned to attempt for at least another month." Maya lowered herself gratefully into the chair, her legs finally giving out. "It wasn't about me today," she said. watching Corporal Reeves walking with renewed purpose toward his own therapy session. "I think I'm beginning to understand what drives you," Jensen said. "It's never been about proving your own strength, has it? It's about what your strength can do for others." Maya smiled tiredly. "My father had a saying, the strongest people use their strength to carry others, not to stand above them." The next morning, Maya woke to find an official-looking envelope on her bedside table. Inside was a letter from the Surgeon General of the United States Navy, requesting her participation in a specialized research program studying exceptional human performance under extreme conditions. The letter emphasized that findings could potentially improve training and survival rates for combat personnel. Maya was still considering the request when her phone rang. Wilson calling from his new assignment. "Rodriguez, how's the recovery going?" His familiar voice boomed through the speaker. "Making progress," Maya replied. "Thanks for the carving." "It's beautiful." "Ah, it's nothing. Keeps my hands busy." His tone shifted, becoming more serious. "Listen, I heard about the research program they want you for." Jackson mentioned it. "News really does travel fast," Maya said, slightly exasperated. "I just got the letter this morning." "Well, are you going to do it?" Maya sighed. "I'm not sure. I've never wanted to be a lab specimen or some kind of medical curiosity." "That's not what this is," Wilson said firmly. "Maya, what you did that night in Somalia, carrying Jackson and me out while you were bleeding from 6 gunshot wounds, it changed how people think about what's humanly possible. If researchers can understand even a fraction of how you did that, think about how many lives could be saved." His words resonated with what Colonel Hayes had said in the garden. Purpose transcends pain. Perhaps sharing her experience, subjecting herself to studies and tests, was another way to fulfill that greater purpose. "I'll think about it," Maya promised. "Good. Oh, and one more thing. The guys and I are coming for your Navy Cross ceremony next month. Try not to do anything else superhuman before then, okay? Some of us ordinary mortals have egos to maintain." Maya laughed, appreciating his attempt to lighten the moment. "I'll do my best." After ending the call, Maya wheeled herself to the window, looking out at the autumn leaves swirling across the hospital grounds. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, not just the physical journey from Somalia to this recovery room, but the deeper journey from being an underestimated support element to someone whose actions were now influencing military medicine and special operations training. She reached for the small wooden carving Wilson had sent, running her fingers over the figure carrying a wounded comrade. It captured something essential about that night, not just the physical burden, but the absolute commitment to bringing everyone home. Maya made her decision. She would participate in the research program, not for recognition or advancement, but because if her experience could help save even one more life, then every moment of pain and struggle would have additional meaning. Later that day, she met with her medical team to discuss accelerating her rehabilitation program. Dr. Jensen was hesitant at first, citing the risks of pushing too hard too fast. "I understand the concerns," Maya said calmly. "But I've been invited to help develop training for a new joint task force, and I need to be physically ready as soon as possible." Dr. Garcia, the neurological specialist, studied her thoughtfully. "Lieutenant, your recovery has already defied medical expectations. Your rate of nerve regeneration and muscle repair exceeds anything in our reference data. But there are natural, biological limits to healing processes." Maya nodded. "I respect that. I'm not asking to ignore biological reality. I'm asking for a program that acknowledges what I've already proven, that with the right motivation and approach, we can sometimes push beyond what's considered medically probable." The medical team exchanged glances, having witnessed Maya's extraordinary progress firsthand. "All right," Jensen finally agreed. "We'll design an accelerated program, but with conditions, daily monitoring, immediate adjustments if we see signs of regression." and you have to be completely honest about pain levels and limitations. Deal, Maya said, extending her hand. As the meeting concluded, Dr. Garcia held back. When they were alone, she said quietly, "Lieutenant Rodriguez, I've been practicing medicine for 26 years. I've never seen anyone recover from injuries like yours at this pace. From a purely scientific perspective, it's fascinating. But as someone who works with wounded warriors every day, it's something else entirely. It's hope." Maya considered this. If my case gives others hope, then perhaps that's as important as any medical insight it provides. Exactly, Garcia. Agreed. Science can explain how bodies heal, but it struggles to quantify the impact of determination, purpose, and spirit. What you're demonstrating here goes beyond medicine. You're showing that our limits may be far more expansive than we've been taught to believe. That evening, Maya sat at her desk writing in a journal, something her therapist had recommended. As part of her psychological recovery, she wrote not about her physical progress or medical treatments, but about the deeper insights her journey had revealed. "I'm beginning to understand that what happened in Somalia wasn't just about physical endurance or training. It was about complete focus on a purpose greater than myself. When I was carrying Commander Jackson, I wasn't thinking about my own pain or injuries. I wasn't thinking about whether what I was doing was possible. I was entirely focused on getting him to safety, on not letting him die in that place. Everything else, pain, fear, doubt, became irrelevant in the face of that singular purpose. Perhaps that's the secret that the researchers are trying to understand. Not just how the body can function beyond its apparent limits, but how the mind can temporarily set aside those limits when something matters enough. My grandfather once told me that the human spirit is the most powerful force on earth, stronger than muscle, more enduring than bone, more resilient than any material created by science. I didn't fully understand what he meant until that night. In Somalia, carrying the weight of another's life on my wounded body. Now I see my recovery as another form of the same journey. Each painful step is carrying hope for others who face their own impossible situations. If my story helps even one person believe that they can push beyond what they thought possible, then every moment of this struggle has been worthwhile. 6 months after the events in Somalia, the Pentagon's ceremonial hall was filled to capacity. High-ranking military officials, politicians, medical professionals, and special operations personnel gathered for what was officially described as a standard awards ceremony. But everyone present knew this was anything but standard. The Navy Cross, the second highest decoration awarded for valor in combat, was rarely bestowed with such high-profile attendance. Captain Maya Rodriguez, recently promoted, stood tall in her dress uniform. The physical transformation from the broken, blood-soaked figure who had staggered into the forward operating base was remarkable, though she still carried scars. 6 distinct marks that mapped the path of bullets through her body. Her posture betrayed no hint of lingering disability. The Secretary of Defense approached the podium. "Today we recognize extraordinary courage, unwavering determination, and the highest ideals of service and sacrifice." His eyes found Maya in the front row, noting that some acts of valor are so profound they change not just the lives directly affected, but our collective understanding of human potential. As the citation was read aloud, detailing how then Lieutenant Rodriguez, despite sustaining 6 gunshot wounds, had carried a critically wounded Navy SEAL over hostile terrain while providing medical care and security, Maya's mind returned to that night, not to the pain or fear, but to the absolute clarity she had found in her purpose. Commander Jackson, now fully recovered and returned to active duty, stood to pin the Navy Cross on Maya's uniform. Their eyes met briefly, no words needed between two people who had shared an experience beyond ordinary understanding. Jackson thanked her simply for his life, his voice audible only to Maya. Maya replied that it was always her duty. When invited To speak, Maya approached the podium with characteristic composure. She looked out at the assembled crowd, senior officials in the front rows, her fellow service members behind them, and in the back, a group she had specifically requested be invited wounded warriors from Walter Reed, including Corporal Reeves, now walking with a barely perceptible limp. Maya began by stating that this honor recognized a single night of service, but she stood there representing countless others who demonstrate the same commitment every day, without recognition or ceremony. She paused, gathering her thoughts, explaining that many had asked how she did what she did that night. Medical researchers had studied her case, looking for physiological explanations. Special operations units had examined the tactical decisions involved. But the truth was simpler than complex scientific analysis might suggest. Maya looked directly at the wounded warriors, explaining that the night in Somalia, she discovered something that many warriors throughout history have found in their most desperate moments. When the mission matters enough, when another life depends on your actions, the human spirit can transcend what seem like immovable physical limitations. Her voice strengthened as she continued. The bullets that struck her that night should have ended her fight. Medical science tells us that the blood loss alone should have rendered her unconscious. But something more powerful than bullets or blood loss drove her forward. The absolute refusal to accept that a brother warrior would die if she had any capacity to prevent it. The hall was silent, captivated. Maya explained that she had spent months working with researchers trying to understand what happened physiologically during those hours. The science was fascinating, but incomplete. What she knew with certainty was this: we are all capable of far more than we believe. Our perceived limitations are often just that, perceptions, not absolute boundaries. Maya gestured to the wounded warriors, explaining that during her recovery, she had met true heroes, men and women facing challenges far greater than what she endured for a single night. They showed the same spirit every day, pushing forward when progress seemed impossible, refusing to surrender to pain or circumstance. She looked down at the medal now pinned to her chest, accepting this honor with humility, knowing that the same potential for extraordinary service existed in every person wearing their nation's uniform, and indeed in every human being who found a purpose greater than themselves. As Maya concluded her remarks, the audience rose in unanimous standing ovation. The applause continued long after protocol would normally dictate its end, a spontaneous recognition that they had witnessed something beyond the usual ceremonial formalities. After the ceremony, a reception allowed for more personal conversations. Maya found herself approached by people from various backgrounds, military leaders seeking insight, medical professionals curious about her recovery, fellow operators offering quiet respect. One encounter particularly affected her. A woman in civilian clothes approached with a young boy, perhaps 10 years old. The woman introduced herself as Elizabeth Jackson, Commander Jackson's wife, and her son James. Maya expressed that it was an honor to meet them both. Elizabeth Jackson took Maya's hands in hers, asking, "How do you thank someone for bringing your husband home, for making sure their son still has his father?" Tears filled her eyes as she said there were no adequate words. Maya replied gently that no thanks were necessary, that her husband would have done the same for any of them. Young James looked up at Maya with undisguised awe, saying his dad told him she was the strongest person he'd ever met, stronger than anyone in his SEAL team. Maya kneeled to the boy's level, explaining that his dad was being kind. But she wanted to tell him something important. True strength isn't about muscles or how much you can lift. It's about what you're willing to do for others when it really matters. The boy nodded solemnly, mentioning that his dad said that too, that she kept going when anyone else would have stopped. Maya confided that was the real secret, never deciding that you're finished until the mission is complete. Later, Maya found a quiet corner with Commander Jackson and Wilson, away from the formal proceedings. The three shared a moment of companionable silence, bonds forged in blood and survival transcending ordinary military camaraderie. Wilson finally commented that it was quite a circus, gesturing to the high-profile attendees. Maya nodded, noting it wasn't exactly her comfort zone. Jackson studied her, observing that she had changed, not just the promotion or the recovery, but something deeper. Maya considered this, thinking that surviving something that should have killed you changes your perspective. Every day felt like bonus time. Jackson agreed he understood that, but noted it was more than gratitude he was seeing, it was clarity. Maya changed the subject, mentioning that the new Joint Task Force began training next month, and she had been reviewing the candidate files. They had some exceptional people interested. Wilson grinned, asking if word was true that the selection process would include carrying wounded teammates for miles while being shot at. Maya laughed, saying no, but maybe they should consider it, as it might be educational. Their light-hearted moment was interrupted by the approach of General Richards, commander of Joint Special Operations Command, who greeted them and complimented the outstanding ceremony. Richards asked Maya if she had a moment, as there was someone he'd like her to meet. Maya followed the general to where a tall, distinguished man in a tailored suit waited. Richards introduced Dr. Andrew Mitchell, director of the Advanced Human Performance Initiative, who had been following her case with great interest. Dr. Mitchell expressed that it was a privilege to meet her, explaining that her case had challenged some of their most fundamental assumptions about human physiological limits. Maya shook his hand firmly, noting that she had been told this, though she was still not entirely comfortable being referred to as a case. Mitchell smiled apologetically, suggesting that perhaps experience would be more appropriate. Either way, the data they had gathered from her recovery had already led to significant advances in their understanding of stress response and physical endurance. Maya replied that she was glad some good had come from it. Mitchell emphasized that it was more than some good. They were developing new protocols for combat casualty care, based partly on insights from her experience. Early testing suggested they could increase survival rates by as much as 17% in catastrophic injury scenarios. Maya's professional interest was immediately engaged as she asked what kind of protocols. Mitchell explained modifications to blood replacement strategies, neural pathway maintenance during severe trauma, and psychological approaches that may help wounded personnel maintain function longer when evacuation is delayed. Mitchell's eyes were animated with scientific enthusiasm as he noted the fascinating element was how her mind-body connection remained intact despite injuries that typically disrupt essential systems. General Richards interjected that what Dr. Mitchell was too academic to say directly was that her refusal to give up that night in Somalia may help save countless lives in future conflicts. The reality of this impact struck Maya profoundly. What had been a desperate struggle for survival, hers and her teammates, was being transformed into knowledge that could extend to battlefields she would never see, helping warriors she would never meet. Mitchell said he would like to continue their work together, explaining that the next phase of research focused on training methods that might help others access similar reserves under extreme conditions. Maya agreed immediately to make herself available. As the reception wound down, Maya found herself drawn back to the wounded warriors who had attended. Corporal Reeves stood with several others, their physical challenges evident, but their spirits unbowed. Maya asked how he was finding civilian life, noting his discharge pen. He replied that it was different, that he was starting college next month for engineering. He figured if he could learn to walk on a prosthetic, he could learn differential equations. His smile was confident, a far cry from the uncertain young Marine she'd first met at Walter Reed. Maya assured him he would excel, that the same determination applied. Another wounded warrior, an Army staff sergeant missing both legs, spoke up, explaining that Maya's story got him through some dark days in rehab. When the pain was bad and progress seemed impossible, he would think that Rodriguez kept going with 6 bullet holes. "We all find our motivation somewhere," she finally said. "I'm honored if my story helped, but the strength was yours all along." "That's where you're wrong, ma'am," the sergeant replied respectfully. "Sometimes we need to borrow strength until we find our own. Your story let a lot of us borrow yours when ours was running low." That night, alone in her hotel room, Maya reflected on the day's events. The medal itself meant little to her. Metal and ribbon couldn't capture what had happened that night in Somalia or the journey of recovery that followed. What mattered were the connections formed, the lives touched, the boundaries pushed beyond what had seemed possible. Her phone rang, an unexpected call from Colonel Hayes, the double amputee combat surgeon from Walter Reed. "Congratulations, Captain," Hayes said warmly. "The ceremony was broadcast on military channels. You spoke beautifully." "Thank you, ma'am. I'm still processing everything," Hayes chuckled. "That feeling never entirely goes away. Listen, I'm calling because I have a proposition for you. The medical center is establishing a new program, Resilience Beyond Boundaries, focused on integrating advanced physical recovery techniques with psychological approaches for catastrophically wounded warriors." "Sounds innovative," Maya commented. "It is, and we want you involved, not just as a case study, but as part of the leadership team. Your unique perspective bridging special operations and medical worlds would be invaluable." Maya hadn't expected this. "I'm honored, ma'am, but my commitment to the Joint Task Force training program would remain your primary duty," Hayes interrupted. "This would be advisory, perhaps 1 weekend monthly. The impact could be significant. Maya, you've lived what we're trying to teach. That recovery isn't just about physical healing, but about reclaiming purpose and possibility." The opportunity resonated deeply. "When you put it that way, how could I refuse?" "Excellent. We'll coordinate schedules." Hayes paused. "There's something else you should know. That young Marine you connected with at Walter Reed Reeves?" "Yes, I saw him today. His recovery accelerated dramatically after your interaction. The medical team couldn't explain the sudden progress. When asked, he simply said, 'Captain, Rodriguez showed me what's possible when you refuse to accept limitations.' You're creating ripples, Maya, effects that extend far beyond what you can directly observe." After ending the call, Maya stood at her hotel window, looking out at the Washington Monument illuminated against the night sky. She thought about ripples, how a single action could spread outward in ways impossible to predict or fully comprehend. The night in Somalia had been about survival, about refusing to accept that death was inevitable for her or her teammates. She couldn't have known then how that stubborn refusal would transform into something larger, inspiring other wounded warriors, advancing medical science, challenging fundamental assumptions about human capability. Her grandfather's words came back to her. "The true impact of our choices often remains invisible to us. We see only our immediate struggle, while the universe sees the endless ripples our actions create across time and lives." 1 month later, Maya stood before 24 candidates selected for the new Joint Special Operations Medical Response Team. The group represented diverse backgrounds: special operations medics, combat surgeons, pararescue jumpers, corpsmen. All elite in their fields, all volunteers for a unit that would undertake the most challenging medical evacuations in the most hostile environments. "You've all read the mission parameters," Maya began, her voice carrying across the training facility. "You know the statistical risks. What you don't yet understand is that this unit will operate beyond conventional limitations." She paused, allowing her words to register. Traditional medical doctrine focuses on what's probable, on statistical outcomes and established protocols. Those remain essential foundations. But this unit will also explore the edge of the possible, what humans can achieve when failure means losing another warrior's life. Maya walked slowly along the line of candidates, making eye contact with each. The training you're about to undertake will push you beyond what you currently believe you can endure. You'll fail repeatedly. You'll question your decision to volunteer. You'll discover limits you didn't know existed, and then you'll move beyond them. A hand raised. A Navy corpsman with multiple combat deployments visible in his service ribbons. Ma'am, with respect, we've all been through selection processes for our original units. Most of us have combat experience. What makes this training different? Maya nodded, appreciating the direct question. The difference is integration of physical capacity, medical knowledge, tactical proficiency, and mental resilience. In conventional units, these are trained separately. Here, they become a single capability. She continued, consider what happens in extreme circumstances. You're wounded. Your patient is critical. Extraction is compromised, and hostiles are closing in. In that moment, the artificial divisions between combatant and medic, between physical and mental endurance, between individual survival and mission accomplishment all dissolve. You become simply a warrior trying to save a life while preserving your own. Maya touched the scars visible along her neck, permanent reminders of that night in Somalia. I've been in that situation. 6 bullets, a critically wounded teammate, miles of hostile territory between us and safety. What I learned that night wasn't about extraordinary heroism. It was about accessing capabilities that already existed, but remained untapped until absolutely necessary. Her voice intensified. This program isn't about creating superhuman medics. It's about teaching you to access the full spectrum of your existing capabilities when everything is on the line. To function effectively when both you and your patient are wounded. To make correct medical decisions under extreme duress. To keep moving when every physical signal is telling you to stop. The candidate stood straighter, the challenge igniting something visible in their postures and expressions. The human body and mind contain reserves most people never access, Maya continued. Traditional training touches perhaps 60% of your true capability. Special operations selection might push you to 80%. This program will take you to 95% and show you what's possible in that final 5% that emerges only in the most desperate circumstances. Over the following weeks, Maya worked alongside the unit's training cadre to implement a program unlike any previously established. Physical training was conducted under increasingly challenging conditions, after sleep deprivation, while managing simulated injuries during complex medical scenarios. Candidates learned to perform emergency procedures after running miles, with heavy packs to make triage decisions while under simulated enemy fire, to navigate difficult terrain while carrying wounded teammates. But perhaps most revolutionary was the psychological component. Maya worked with Dr. Mitchell and Colonel Hayes to develop techniques for accessing deeper reserves of determination and focus. Candidates learned to recognize the mental signals that typically triggered surrender and to push beyond them. They studied Maya's case extensively, analyzing the physiological and psychological factors that had enabled her impossible journey. Throughout the training, Maya participated directly, demonstrating techniques, joining physical challenges, sharing insights from her experience. She refused the special treatment her rank could have afforded, instead leading from the front in every evolution. 6 weeks into the program, during a particularly grueling night exercise, Maya noticed one candidate struggling. Chief Petty Officer Daniels had been consistently strong throughout training, but tonight something was off. His movements were sluggish, his decision-making hesitant. Maya pulled him aside during a brief rest period. "What's happening, Chief?" Daniels hesitated. "Just tired, ma'am. I'll push through." Maya studied him more carefully. "This isn't normal fatigue. Something specific is affecting your performance." The chief's professional facade cracked slightly. "Got news this morning. My brother, he's also Navy, was injured in an operation. Critical condition. Family's with him, but... His voice trailed off. Why didn't you request emergency leave? Maya asked. The mission comes first, Daniels replied automatically. He would understand. Maya considered this, then made a decision. Gather your gear. I'm driving you to the airfield myself. Daniels looked shocked. Captain, I don't want special treatment. I don't want to fail this selection. Listen. Carefully, Chief, Maya said firmly. What we're building here isn't about pushing through regardless of circumstances. It's about making the right decisions in complex situations. Sometimes the right decision is to recognize when personal factors will compromise your effectiveness. She continued, more importantly, we're training to save lives. Right now, your brother needs his family. Being there for him is your mission at this moment. The team will be here when you return. Daniel swallowed hard. Thank you, ma'am. As they drove to the airfield, Maya shared something she rarely discussed. After Somalia, when I was recovering at Walter Reed, I pushed myself relentlessly. I was determined to return to duty faster than any medical timeline predicted. That determination is legendary, ma'am, Daniels commented. What isn't widely known is that I pushed too hard at one point and suffered a significant setback, tore newly healed tissue, developed an infection that nearly cost me my leg. A wise doctor told me something I've never forgotten. Strength isn't just about pushing forward. Sometimes it's about knowing when to pause, when to redirect, when to recover. Maya glanced at the chief. The unit we're building needs warriors who understand the full spectrum of strength, including the strength to be present for family when it matters most. Daniels nodded slowly. I think I understand, ma'am. Your brother needs you now. The team needs you at your best when you return. Both of these truths can coexist. As the training program neared completion, Maya assembled the remaining candidates, now a cohesive unit, forged through shared challenge and achievement. What you've accomplished here is just the beginning, she told them. You've expanded your understanding of what's possible, but the true test will come in the field, when lives depend on your ability to access everything you've learned under the worst possible conditions. She looked at each face, seeing in them the same determination she had discovered within herself on that fateful night in Somalia. Remember this. The human spirit can endure far more than the human body was designed to withstand. When your muscles fail, when your endurance falters, when pain clouds your judgment, that's when you must rely on something deeper, something beyond physical capacity. Maya touched the Navy Cross pinned to her uniform. This medal recognizes a single night of refusing to accept defeat. But what we've built here together goes beyond any individual achievement. We've created a new understanding of human potential. Not just what's theoretically possible, but what's practically achievable when the stakes are highest. The unit stood at attention, transformed from the individuals who had arrived weeks earlier. They carried themselves differently now, with a quiet confidence, born not of arrogance but of genuine self-knowledge and tested capability. You will face situations where conventional wisdom says failure is inevitable, Maya concluded. In those moments, remember what you've learned here, that the boundary between possible and impossible is rarely fixed or absolute. It shifts according to necessity, according to will, according to purpose. As the first operational team of the new Joint Special Operations Medical Response Unit deployed months later, Maya watched the helicopter lift off with a profound sense of purpose fulfilled. The seeds planted during her own desperate journey across hostile terrain, carrying a wounded warrior when medical science said she should have been incapacitated, had grown into something that would save countless lives. Her grandfather's wisdom echoed in her mind. True strength isn't about never falling. It's about rising every time you fall, especially when rising seems impossible. And the greatest strength of all is helping others to rise when they cannot do so alone. 6 bullets had torn through her body that night in Somalia. 6 wounds that should have ended her fight, her mission, perhaps her life. Instead, They had become the beginning of something profound, a deeper understanding of human potential that would ripple outward through lives and generations in ways she would never fully comprehend. Sometimes the greatest triumphs emerge from our darkest moments, when we discover that our perceived limitations are just that, perceptions, not boundaries. In those critical moments of choice between surrender and persistence, we define not just our own futures, but the possibilities for all who follow in our footsteps. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.